You know, the trim job in any build can make a huge difference, not only making it feel complete, but making it look great too. And in this week's video, I'm gonna show you how I trimmed out my bus, the one I'm standing in right here, around the windows and along the ceiling, starting with rough sawn walnut, and show you all the steps I took along the way to get to the final result you see here. Granted, this was a bit of a fancy job, but some of this I think you'll at least find entertaining and maybe even useful as you approach your own build. You're not going to want to go anywhere. This week's video is all about trim. My name's Chuck Cassady. Let's get cutting. So before we go in the shop and I show you how we're going to start doing things, this is the end result that we're going for. It's actually a design that I kind of stole from the trim in my house that I was redoing. Shout out to Brad from Counting Around. He was the guy that helped me work on that. But we basically recreated this is an old trim style. What I like is that it doesn't involve using miters anywhere, so that keeps it easy. And the main pieces are the sill here. This is the casement that goes around the inside of our window opening. And then after the casing, then we have the actual trim. So we've got our vertical pieces here, this little fillet, which is a little guy that sits in there, and the cap on top, and then a piece on the bottom. Now, if you're gonna be doing a tile backsplash or something, you'll wanna go ahead and leave that off, which is what we did there. The tile is gonna come right up underneath that. And I think that looks better if you ask me. Also in the kitchen here, we made the sill a little wider so we can set plants and other cute stuff on top of it. Now all of these trim profiles, including the trim here in the ceiling, if you'll notice we've got roundovers and we've got some really nice details. We use some palm routers for that. And I'm gonna start by showing you how to get to this, starting with just some rough sawn walnut. And the first part is going to be taking a board that's, you know, bendy and twisty and cutting using a track saw one straight edge down it so that now we have a reference, and then we can run it through table saws and from that one straight edge build off and make nice square dimensional pieces of lumber with roundovers that are sanded and finished so that they look really nice. We actually pre-finished this all before we installed it, which is a really good way to go. Highly recommend doing that. So let's go back in time to the Chuck of the past in the shop as I get my track saw out and show you how I make the first straight cut on a rough sawn piece of walnut. And then we're gonna go through the steps of milling that down and then installing it with a nice time lapse where I give you a recap. And then we'll call it a day. So the first step in taking your rough lumber and turning it into something usable, like all the trim pieces we're putting in, is getting a straight edge on that. This lumber here has just been sliced essentially and then ran through a planer to get it to an approximate thickness. The thickness we're starting at is 6/4. That's just the way carpenters like to talk about the thicknesses of their woods for some reason, but that means it's 1.5 inches thick. We're actually trying to get this down to something that's around 3/8. So we're gonna be slicing a piece off. Now that we have a straight edge there, running it through the table saw, slicing a piece off, and then taking that piece and then cutting it in half. It's called resawing to make two thinner pieces. We're gonna run those through our thickness planer behind me, and then we'll hit it with a roundover bit on a router, sand it, and that'll give us the pieces that you see me and Adam putting up inside the bus. And this is how, very roughly speaking, you can take rough cut hardwoods, which is, you know, where all the good stuff is, and turn it into usable trim for your bus. This is not a great woodworking tutorial, but if you're curious how you do this and, you know, how you get to that point, this is how it starts. All right, so now that we've got a straight edge on our board, our blade set to the right width, we're gonna go ahead and rip a slice off that and then resaw it and throw it through the planer. Have to jack the blade up a little bit because it's such a thick piece. If you're gonna be doing this, I definitely recommend investing in a nice blade designed for making these kinds of rip cuts. So now we're gonna raise that blade up to be thick enough to pass this piece through vertically now, and we're gonna rip it in half. This process is called resawing. When you're figuring out which way to feed it through, it's nice to have the bow go into the fence. It'll make it easier to keep the blade thickness consistent up against the fence and the piece of wood moving through. If it's bowed out away from the fence, you're gonna have to be pushing into the fence. It's a little more dangerous and it's a lot harder, at least for me. Now we're gonna take those over to the thickness planer and plane them down to the right thickness. Now, that cut right there is a dangerous cut, no doubt. And if you're working with two people, it's really important that the person who's grabbing it doesn't ever have the opportunity to pull the other person's hand into the blade. Don't wanna pull the piece of wood through. Also, since I don't run a riving knife on my table saw, which is sketchy for sure, I guess, but you know, hasn't got me in trouble yet. As it was running through, you saw it started to pinch the blade. So I got my fingers in there to kind of pull those two pieces apart. Again, not like the perfect way to do it, but this is kind of what it's like, you know, working on a job site in a house or something. We're gonna take it over to the thickness planer. That's a really satisfying part. You're gonna love it. All right, so the thickness planer, it planes it down to a thickness, and we're gonna sneak up on that and basically just shave off these rough cut layers on the face of these boards. And the end result is gonna look really nice. Right now, you know, we've got saw marks and things like that on these sides. And when these come out of there, they're gonna look awesome. So now we're gonna lower it down and run it through again and just sneak up on our finished thickness. So we got those to the right thickness. Now these are actually going to be used for the tops and bottom pieces on the windows in there. And so what the next thing is that we're going to do is cut them to the length for those pieces, and then they get a round over on 3 sides, sand them. We'll even put the finish on first, and then we can shoot them on. I'll show you what those round over bits look like in a second once these are cut to length. So we've been using a lot of round over bits in the trim, and I just want to give you an example of how it really makes something look nice. So this is my wall cap here. This is actually a piece of walnut that has a notch taken out of the middle, so it slots onto the wall. Gives this wall a lot more rigidity, but as you can see here, we put a round over on it, and that round over just takes the edge off, literally, and makes it look a lot more finished. And that detail's over here too. Big fan of the round over. It makes everything just look nicer, softer. There's no hard edges. Real big fan of the round over bit. Oh dude, sick. Look at that. Yeah, yes. One day I'll eat some.
That's just crackers?
Yeah.
Like on toast with butter? I know, that's
It's food grade, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
So like, so the finish we're using is a product made by Osmo. It's their polyox oil. I guess it's technically a wood flooring finish, but we use it on furniture all the time. It's food safe. This is their clear satin, and what I love about it, like, we're in a dusty shop. There's no chance in hell that we're gonna get a good finish with anything like paint or polyurethane. And this stuff, we could wipe it on real thick, let it soak in for just a minute, and then wipe it off, and then we're ready to shoot it up. Now, when all is said and done, I'll go through and do one more coat just to make sure we're soaked in everywhere, but this stuff is amazing. It is just oils and waxes in one product. And we've used this on countertops in the past, like butcher-bought countertops that get really neglected. I've seen them, and they're still looking good to this day. This is what I use on the cabinets in my own home, and it's a great trim thing. And like, I mean, I think it kind of smells good, in a weird way. So, all right, so we're basically at this profile now. We got the round over on one side. We're gonna cut these to length. Once they're cut to length, we'll throw the round over on the two sides, final sand, put some finish on the sides, and then we'll go shoot them on. That's gonna wrap up the window trim in the bus. That's an important step right there. Cutting off the end from the mill it's probably not square. So just taking a sliver off and then pulling your tape from that side, it's gonna make sure that the end piece is square. I've made this mistake enough times that I still think about it every time. All right, so here's our finished upper piece. So this is gonna sit on top of the window trim or below it. I can't, depending on whatever window this is going on. So it's got the round overs on these three corners, and then on this face, this side here, sorry, these two corners, and then these three sides. And yeah, I messed up on the count. So this was a last minute, just throw this together. Let's go put them in. So the first step in doing your trim work is figuring out the design of your trim system, and that's what me and Adam are busting out right there. We milled up a few sample pieces to make sure that we liked it. And once we had that set, we went ahead and threw up the ceiling trim. There's really nothing too special about that. The order of operations with the window trim is you want to go ahead and cut your window sill first, and it almost takes on a bit of a T profile the way it extends past the sides there. The next step, once those are all installed, is to go ahead and case the inside of the windows, which is what we had just wrapped up before we milled up some more lumber and started going around the outside of the windows with the, I would call it the frame or just the trim. We've got that little detail across the top, that little stick that goes in there, and then it's capped with a top piece and a bottom piece. On some windows, you'll see we didn't actually put that bottom piece below the sill, and that's because there's going to be a tile backsplash coming up there, and it looks a lot cleaner, in my opinion, if you just leave that off. So this is what our finished trim profile is gonna look like here on the window. And the pieces that we just did are going on above and below the windows. This one doesn't get one below though.
That's true.
We've made this mistake before.
We've been through this.
There's gonna be a tile backsplash that goes underneath that, which is why we're not putting the lower trim on. But Adam just set that upper piece on, so that'll go on there. We're gonna get the upper and lower trim on that one. That's my bedroom. And then here in the bathroom, around this tiny little window, and then we're done. You know, nothing like a nice trim job to really tie the build together. But in all seriousness, I hope that was helpful in some degree for you. Now keep in mind, I've got a full shop, or had a full shop, and have been doing this for a while, and I had Adam's help, and we are not afraid of getting into the woodworking and sawdust. But this trim system here I really like because it gets you out of having to use miters. You can do it all with a chop saw, table saw, planer, and a palm router, and then some type of nail gun. And granted, those are a lot of tools, but a lot of those you can get secondhand. Maybe got a buddy with a planer, and everyone should have a palm router. They're so freaking cheap, and they give you these nice round overs that really, they make your build look very, very professional. Hope you got some inspiration from this. We're gonna see you next time, but before we go, I wanna just give a quick shout out to all of the people supporting me over on Patreon. And so here's looking at you: Scott Rubin, Hinaka, Remington, Richie, Ed Wehunt, Bradley Marsipini, Kevin Wittenauer, Drew F, Becky Fuller, Arbor Season. Oh, Arbor Season, thank you. Little Bus, Big Dreams, Kevin, what's up? Evan Something, Joshua Trainer, Sean Randall, Greg DeWolf, Chance, Shanti Moves, Mitchell Allison, Scott Schur, Kitty and Moxie, Hey Tim, Desrick, Just Skoolie, Willard Willems, Marcus Henderson, CDO 75, Corey Mullins, Edward Aloco, Tyler Johnson, Kyle Polsky, Patrick Riley, Gian Mario, Swirly01, Matt Evans, James Seidel, Steve Drumheller, Dan Burke, Zachary Taylor, The Happy Fractal, Chad Foss, Seth Cossey. Thank you so much for your continued support over on the Patreon. That stuff is money without strings, and we really like it. Keeps our income consistent when YouTube, well, she's a fickle mistress, let me tell you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll check you out next week.